Alright, so we are going to be looking at the real estate transaction from the very first step to the very final step. It's going to be more of an overall look at the real estate transaction, not from a buyer side and not from a seller side. So it's going to be more of a what happens in a transaction rather than what buyers need to do or what sellers need to do. Alright, so the first thing that happens in the real estate transaction is going to be a home prep, and this is going to be on the seller side, obviously, because they own the home. So they're going to do everything that's listed here. They're going to do seller's disclosures. They're going to get their inspections, home, pest, roof, if they are single family. They're going to make any repairs if they want, paint, carpet, anything to update the home to make it look nice. And the agent's going to prepare his marketing, get everything ready for the home to get on. And also in this stage, shall we say, the buyer is getting pre-approved, talking to a lender, and getting ready to start looking at homes. And once the home hits the market, as we say, it's on the MLS, it's on Zillow, it's on Redfin, it's on all the other websites. So now the buyers can see this property. So buyers start looking at homes, they start looking at homes online, and they also start looking at homes with their realtor, private tours or open houses. And once the buyer writes an offer, an as-is contract, they start the open for negotiations, and they start the 30-day close of escrow. Typically, it can be any day amount of close of escrow, but typically it's 30 days. And all these days are going to be typically just average out. And once we're open for negotiations, anything can happen in this point before contingencies are removed. The buyer can ask the seller to do anything, repairs, anything like that. If the buyer finds anything on a report that they do on their own that's not on the seller's reports, they can ask the seller to fix it, items like that. So buyers will do their due diligence. They'll do their own buyer's inspections if they want. They're going to get their financing, so they're going to get it's already pre-approved at this point, but they're going to go ahead and get that loan funded. And they're going to find out if the home appraises or not, because it's very important. If the home doesn't appraise, the lender's not going to lend you the money for the home because it's not worth that much. And this all typically takes 17 to 21 days. And typically within 3 days, we have an initial deposit. Sometimes it's 1 day. Typically it's 3 days. The buyer puts in 3% of the purchase price into an escrow account to say, I'm willing to buy this home. I'm not going to back out. Here's my initial deposit. And if anything crazy happens where the buyer back out after the contingency removal, then the seller actually has a right to go after this initial deposit. So they have a right to go after that 3%. It doesn't happen typically, but just know it can happen. And once the buyer does all his due diligence, the seller's disclosed everything, the contingency removal will happen. This is a very important part in the transaction because this is when pretty much the home is getting ready to close. The whole transaction is pretty much waiting for this point. Once this happens, it is pretty much clear. Just the loan just has to fund at this point, and you just have to do your final walkthrough and a sign off. So once this happens, very, very important. The buyer pretty much cannot back out. Seller can't really pretty much back out. Pretty much almost there in the transaction. So after that, you do the final walkthrough. Just go through the home to make sure none of the walls turn pink or anything crazy like that. It's the same as when you wrote the offer. And that after you confirm that, it's not a contingency on the contract, but it's just to confirm. And once you do that, you go to sign off, where you sign a bunch of papers. It's going to take about an hour or so. The buyer goes and the seller goes. Buyer has a little more paperwork, so be ready for that. And then officially you close escrow. So that's pretty much the real estate transaction. And at the end, the seller needs to remove all the staging, broom clean the floors, have their loan payoff information, vacate the property, stop the utilities, and forward their mail to their new address. And the buyer needs to pay the down payment and closing costs. You'll do this at sign off. Make sure you have your home insurance. The lender will require it. And you do your final walkthrough. So that's pretty much the real estate transaction in a nutshell. Obviously, you can get a little more granular, but this is pretty much it from a 30,000 foot view. And yeah, if you have any questions about the transaction, please let me know. And you guys have an amazing day.